Hi, I'm Tom from Volpe Woodworks. Years ago, a customer brought me a Les Paul style guitar. It was actually the full size guitar with the neck still attached. He wanted a pair of some killer looking Bobinga sheets attached to it. And at the time, my vac bag was only so big, and this being a full size guitar, I could not accommodate it. And then the other option with the other problem that it presented me with a challenge is the Bobinga itself is it's heat sensitive, and the iron-on method is not an option for that because the veneer tends to crack and split. It's not a good thing to have apply the heat to a Bobinga. You can see the iron-on method though in my video. I'll have it linked up over here. So the option for pressing this was a vacuum press, or I'm sorry, a veneer press of mine. And the veneer press typically is just two flat sheets or platens that, when compressed with clamps, will hold the veneer flat in place. Well, the Les Paul style guitar is a complex curved surface, so the flat sheets would not really work well for that. So I had to adapt the veneer press to incorporate a sheet of rigid foam insulation, a 1-inch thick. Rigid foam, when it's compressed, will conform itself to whatever's compressing it, and then it springs back enough that it'll hold the veneer tight against the substrate, and then so it'll help hold the veneer in place or anchor it in place while the adhesive cures. I've made this video so that you can see it being demonstrated that you can adapt a current veneer press that you have by adding a sheet of this rigid foam, or you can make one out of some scrap lumber and probably less than $20 worth of bolts and this rigid foam. You can get a sheet of it or a quarter sheet from Lowe's and Home Depot and such. I'm interested in what you think about the project. Please put some comments down below, or if you have any questions. And as usual, I'm always happy to advise on using veneer for your next project. My veneer press is made from leftover 3/4 inch oak flooring. Oak works the best, but 2x4s will work fine too. This press is dedicated to veneer work on guitar bodies, but the length of the cauls is not so critical. Make them the size that fits your needs. I used 1/2-inch bolts, 6 inches long. Carriage bolts are threaded the entire length and will allow for adjustments. I always tell my first-time veneer users that clamping is the key to a successful veneer job. Clamping pressure is required to keep a veneer flat to the surface of the substrate while the adhesive cures. The complex curved surface of a Les Paul style body needs 4 or more pairs of cauls to spread the downward pressure required to compress the foam to the contour of the guitar body. In these images, I'm showing you one of the cauls taken apart and how simple it goes back together. I purchased a fractional sheet of a 1-inch thick rigid foam insulation from my local Lowe's big box store. That's the green piece. The purple piece is just another brand from Home Depot. Still, it works the same. I think it's the Pink Panther brand, whatever. I used a magic marker to trace around the guitar body. Make sure it's at least a 1/2-inch to 3/4 inch oversize. You don't want to be stingy in that area. I did the same to some 3/8 inch plywood pieces. I cut them a little bit oversized, and they're going to act as the platens, and the platens help to spread the downward pressure, the clamping pressure from the cauls. You want 3/8 to 1/2-inch plywood. It has to be sturdy, but yet be flexible enough that it'll bend and flex when you tighten down the cauls. I have the pieces cut the size. Here I'm just showing you how the platen, the foam, and the guitar body are placed in order. For this project, I selected pommel sapele. It's very visually appealing. Looks great on a guitar body. I would have a wide sheet of it. I laid the guitar body onto it and used white chalk to trace an outline. I marked center line. It's very important that you maintain and know where your center line is. I reference it multiple times within this project. It's one of the key parameters of this project. I used a safety razor to cut the veneer out. Lay the guitar body onto it, checking again for center line as your reference. Center line was also marked on the foam. It's very important that you know where your center line is. It's very important to maintain that. It's important to fill the cavities of the pickups. This will prevent the veneer from being damaged as it's under compression. You can use masking tape to fill the voids just as easily. I find it's a good practice to keep the glue bottle closed and make a dry run with all my projects. This way I know I have all the key components and know exactly how they all fit together. I gather the platens, foam, veneer, cawls, and wrench. I go through the entire project from start to finish. Please forgive my attempt at stop motion photography. What I really wanted to illustrate is the veneer and the foam is centered while under clamps. I use my speed wrench to tighten the bolts. Keep your eye on the ivory binding. Notice the gap between the veneer and binding disappears. Also note that some veneer is protruding away from the guitar body. This guarantees that the veneer is cut oversize and will cover the surface of the guitar body. I like Titebond and Titebond 2 for the glue for just about any of my woodworking projects. It provides enough open time to get everything under clamping pressure. Just spread some onto the surface, spread it around with a brush. In this case, I'm using a used toothbrush. Just pretend like you're painting with the adhesive. Just make sure you get a nice even coat all the way out to the edges. Place the veneer on the foam, then place the guitar body on the veneer. Check for alignment. You want to check at the top where the neck pocket is and also at the bottom and make sure that you're still in alignment. And place the top set of cawls over top of the guitar body and tighten with the bolts. You want to see some glue squeeze out. Keep tightening to where the body of the guitar is pushed into the foam about 1/16 of an inch. You can tell you're close when the outer veneer starts to wrinkle and buckle. The boards will creak and the platens will groan. This should be about right. Leave it under clamps for 4 hours. It's best to do it overnight. Waiting a minimum of 4 hours, but overnight would be best. Remove from clamps, remove the top platen, and then flip the whole assembly over. Now we're ready to see if all your hard work is paid off. Remove the green foam from the guitar body. Look at the surface of the rigid foam. You can see how the guitar body left a permanent impression in it, as it should. Inspect the guitar body itself to see if all the veneer is adhered in the places you want. Inspect it in lower bout over towards where the controls are at. That's typically where I've noticed that there's some adhesion problems if you don't apply enough pressure. The dark spots are glue squeeze out. You can sand that off in most cases. All veneers typically have a little bit of that. You can see how the foam has permanently bonded the veneer in that complex curved surface. As with most veneer projects, I recommend hand sanding only. I start out with a coarse grit of 150 grit, working my way up to 220 grit with a piece of the rigid foam as a sanding block. With careful sanding, you can actually feather the veneer down towards the binding and sever the wood fiber away from the binding. You can see here I got a couple close-up images of it in action. It really does speed up the process of trying to get that veneer cut off, but you can sever it with a sandpaper. I sanded the guitar body with up to 220 grit sandpaper and cleaned out the pickup cavities. I washed the surface after sanding with a little bit of denatured alcohol, and it really just pops that pommel sapele. It's so visually appealing. Pommel sapele is one of my favorite veneers to work with. What I'd like you to take away from this video is with the addition of a simple sheet of the rigid foam insulation to your veneer press, you can expand the possibilities of the type of project you can take on laying up veneers on a more complex curved surface. In my opinion, though, this is just an intermediate step to working your way up to a vacuum press bag kit. The vacuum pressing is the superior method of bonding a veneer to a substrate. I'm interested in hearing what you think about the video. Please post your comments and questions in the section below. And also, I'm looking for ideas for future videos. Please reach out to me by email at tom@volpewoodworks.com.